Good afternoon and welcome to Politics in the Pulpit here on your hometown station. This is your holy host, the Bishop of Santa Clarita, Pastor Jerry Cook, back for another opportunity to talk about the two things we are not supposed to talk about in public, but we do anyway: politics and religion. And yes, they do indeed mix. I hope you have had a wonderful Easter celebration. I know that we did at the Freedom's Way Baptist Church and over at the Cook Chateau afterwards. The dinner was wonderful. The Easter egg hunt was exceptional, and the kids enjoyed themselves, and the adults, of course, loved eating. So we had a great time, and we hope that all of you did as well. A little bit later on the show, towards the last segment of the show, I want to talk a little bit about, you hear me talk a lot about the progressive movement infiltrating politics, but some of you might not be familiar how the progressive movement has actually infiltrated the evangelical church. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about an article that suggests that maybe Jesus didn't have his nails pierced with he didn't have his hands pierced with the nails. Maybe he was tied to the cross. And so I'm going to go through an article that, interestingly enough, actually had to backtrack from what they originally had posted. So we'll talk a little bit about progressive liberalism attacking and infiltrating evangelical Christianity. Real quick, shameless plug. Don't forget that Politics in the Pulpit is on Rumble. Please go on to that platform if that is something that you like. And all of the shows there will be uploaded usually about an hour after the show is over, and it is all commercial free. So please check us out, Politics in the Pulpit. You'll see my picture. Connect the link, give us a like, and then, of course, follow us there on Rumble. Today, we are honored to have in studio, not calling in, but in studio, Lieutenant Oscar Martinez with the Sheriff's Department, and he is running against Robert Luna. Of course, Luna is running for a second term, and this second term will indeed be contested. And I got an article right here as we introduce Oscar. It says, Los Angeles County Sheriff Robert Luna, his bid for re-election next year will not go uncontested. Challenging Luna for that seat will be a member of his own department, Lieutenant Oscar Martinez, a 16-year employee of the Sheriff's Department who is assigned to its Palmdale station, said that he's running against the department's needs a leader who will empower deputies to do their jobs. And we are pleased to have Oscar Martinez joining us today here live in the studio at Hometown Station. Oscar, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Pastor, and thank you so much for having me here. Thank you for giving me the chance to come here and share my vision for public safety.
Absolutely. Had the pleasure of meeting you a few weeks ago at a local event here in Santa Clarita. Got to understand a little bit of your past, where you're from, some of your military background, and the fact that you call Santa Clarita your home.
Yes.
And so pleased with that. So if you will, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. My name is Oscar Martinez, and I'm running to be the next sheriff of Los Angeles County. The election will take place in June of 2026. I was born in the Dominican Republic, came to the United States, migrated legally, and when I was about 10 years old. I grew up very poor, but I grew up rich in faith, raised mainly by my grandmother. I grew up in the Catholic faith, and before I joined the Marine Corps, when I became an adult, I actually almost went into the seminary to be a Catholic priest. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I'm married with kids, so
Father Martinez.
Yeah, that has a nice connotation to it. But I left the seminary and I joined the United States Marine Corps right before 9/11. I went in thinking I'm going to get some great training, great experience, going to go see the world. Then, of course, 9/11 happened, and it was 7 years of wars in both Afghanistan and Iraq. No regrets. One of the best decisions I ever made. I learned a lot. I grew up a lot. I went into the Marine Corps with barely a high school degree, and I left with a master's degree and the honor of having served my country in 2 wars. After the Marine Corps, I joined the Sheriff's Department, where I presently served, and like you said at the beginning, I am assigned to a Palmdale station.
Now, this is a non-affiliated run. I mean, you're not supposed to be a Republican. Robert Luna is not supposed to be a Democrat. But the fact of the matter is, even though this is an unaffiliated seat in terms of political party, there is no doubt that you, Luna, and others who have preceded Luna have brought a philosophy in with them.
Correct.
But without getting into all of that, your run is because you feel that the boots on the ground, the men and the women who are representing Los Angeles in the department, have not been represented well.
Correct.
So would you share with our listeners a little bit about your heart for the average officer?
Absolutely. The sheriff is the only elected law enforcement official in the county. If you look throughout the United States, especially in the state of California, the sheriff is the highest law enforcement officer in the county. He's supposed to be non-political, even though he's a politician. Sadly, however, under the leadership or lack thereof of Robert Luna, the sheriff's department has been weaponized for politics, and it is the left side of politics that's being weaponized. In addition with that, our law enforcement officers, our deputies that are out there protecting our communities, do not have the support of their leadership. And the community should be concerned about that, because when the deputies feel that they don't have the backing and the support of their leadership, they're going to be less proactive. When cops are less proactive, the only victim is the community. Again, I'm not saying that our deputies are letting the bad guy go, but they're going to do the very minimum because they're scared of getting in trouble. And I saw that being on the line where I work right now in Palmdale and other stations as well, is the hesitation of our deputies. And it's not so much that they want to do anything wrong or anything illegal. It's they're scared of even doing the right thing because they don't know what this sheriff is going to do just to please the left, to please the anti-police agenda that actually supporting him to become sheriff.
You know, one of the things that I think one of the first things I ever saw happen, I'm trying to recall the gentleman that was shot up in Palmdale about 2 years ago.
Sergeant Owens.
No, not Sergeant Owens. His folks live right here in Castaic. He was shot while...
Deputy Klickenbrummer.
Klickenbrummer, that's
Yes.
exactly it. So I was doing a wedding, ironically, up in Palmdale, and I got a text from an acquaintance of ours that you would know, and he said to me, we had a deputy shot. He's clinging to life. Would you go visit him? And I happened to be just a stone's throw from the hospital. Went over. Right at the same time that I got there, Robert Luna, who was newly elected at the moment,
Correct.
with a lot of animosity with some of the men in the department, when he got there, and this is no joke, I used the Joe Biden line right there. No joke. It's no joke. All the officers turned their backs to Sheriff Luna. And again, he was newly elected.
Correct.
And so we know what happened with Klinkenbrummer. He ended up passing, and there was a lot of animus between the parents as well as to the sheriff. But that was what I saw. And I'm wondering, does that same level of animus still kind of ring through the majority of the people within the department?
I believe it actually increased ever since. Like you said, he was newly elected at the time, and we kind of knew, most of us knew that, where did this guy come from? Look who supported him. Look what his agenda is. And now it's in full color. He has, for example, a constitutional policing advisor that's more unconstitutional than constitutional. And this person is out there creating policy, especially force policies, that are absolutely not in favor of public safety. If anything, they are going to dismantle our public safety. If he moves forward, for example, to sign an agreement with AG Bonta, some kind of settlement degree that has been completely done in secret, people have no idea the damage that's going to do to the largest sheriff's department. It's pretty much going to make the sheriff's department a joke. And again, when that happens, the community is the one that's going to suffer.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me ask you this question. Again, we're talking to Lieutenant Oscar Martinez, who is running for Los Angeles County Sheriff here against Robert Luna. What was the straw that broke the camel's back that made you decide that, hey, I'm running against Robert Luna? I like being lieutenant. I love my cushy home in Castaic. What happened where you said, I'm running?
You can blame the United States Marine Corps for that. The United States Marine Corps, hoorah. The United States Marine Corps trained me to be a go-getter, to never give up, to when I see something wrong, try to fix it. And for too long, for the last 20 years, we have been ruled by sheriffs that are more for themselves than for the troops and the community. Now, some people will say, well, you don't have the experience, you don't have the training, you don't have the ability. There's always going to be those people that are going to try to put you down. I also had people tell me, well, you're never going to win, you're a Republican, you're a conservative, you're never going to win, you're too much of a, they call it churchy, you believe too much in God. You know, California will never vote for that. Well, I disagree with that. I think that people are seeing, they're finally waking up and seeing the damage is being done to our society by the left mainly. And I said to myself, well, let me pray about it. Let me talk to some people. Let me see what they think. And I received a lot of positive encouragement. And at the end, I asked the one person who will make or decide my career in this.
Let me guess, your wife.
My wife, correct. And when I asked her, are you in? Do I have your approval? And she said, well, let's pray some more about it.
Yeah.
And finally, she said, yes. And I said, well, if anybody's going to tell me that I'm wrong, it's my wife.
Yeah.
And she said, no, go forward. You have my support. There's a lot of deputies. A lot of deputies have come forward and given me their support. A lot of members of the community here in Santa Clarita, other parts of the county that I've talked to, that have given me the support and have actually encouraged me for coming forward, not changing who I am, not changing my political party, not changing my belief, but coming forward with integrity and say, this is who I am, this is what I want to do.
Do you think that having that R in front of your name is going to be a liability going into this race?
It's going to be a liability for some voters, and it's going to be a positive for others. But this is who I am. Robert Luna was a Republican his whole life. And right before he ran for sheriff, he decided that he was a Democrat, and he changed. I'm not going to do that. I've been a Republican my whole life, and I'm staying a Republican, and I'm running to be the sheriff of the entire county, whether you're Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. But I'm not going to lie to myself and lie to you by changing who I am just for a vote. I'd rather lose with my integrity than win with a lie. I'm not a hypocrite like Robert Luna.
So, do you think that since the election of a new DA here in Los Angeles County, I supported a different DA during the primary. That individual did not succeed, and now Nathan Hochman ended up succeeding in an overabundance against George Gascon. Basically routed George Gascon
Yes, he did.
by 20 plus points, which tells you that a lot of Democrats, a lot of Republicans, and a lot of independents voted for Hochman.
Yes.
And were disgusted with George Gascon's policies. Do you think that because of Nathan Hochman's more pro-law enforcement attitude that he brings to the DA, do you think that atmosphere lends credibility and a better opportunity for you to run in 2026?
Absolutely. In addition, with Nathan Hochman's campaign, you also have Proposition 36,
Which
passed.
2/3.
10 million people voted for it. Now, keep in mind, in California, there's only 5 million Republicans, which means 5 million independent and or Democrats voted for Proposition 36. The current sheriff, Robert Luna, who's supposed to be the chief law enforcement officer of the county, never endorsed Proposition 36, never said anything in its favor. He remained, I guess you can call it neutral, I don't know. Same thing for Hochman's campaign. Never endorsed Hochman, never talked about Hochman, never said anything against George Gascon. So it goes to show you, are you in favor of law enforcement or are you against it? I believe that the current sheriff, even though he's supposed to be the chief law enforcement officer of this county, it's actually the fifth column of public safety.
Does Robert Luna and the sheriff, whomever it might be, does the sheriff work for the supervisors of Los Angeles, or does the sheriff work for his men and women and the people of Los Angeles County?
The sheriff works for we the people in Los Angeles County, whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, independent, conservative, or liberal. Your job is to protect the communities of this county. It doesn't matter if you're a contract city or if you're not. He's supposed to work with the board supervisor. He's not supposed to be a subject to the board supervisors. I'm going to work with the board supervisors, but my priority is going to be public safety. Now, you're more than welcome to go to the website of the board supervisors. They have 9 priorities. It's right there on their website, and it goes from something about saving the environment to racism to the holy trinity of the left, which is criminals, vagrants, and illegal aliens. Not public safety. Nowhere in those priorities will you find public safety. So when he says I'm working with the board supervisors, I don't know what he's working on, because They're not doing anything for public safety. But that's their prerogative. I'm going to work for public safety, and I'm going to work with them to ensure that we have public safety.
When we come back, I want to ask Oscar about Deputy Trevor Kirk and the federal case against him and get Oscar's take on that. And when we come back on Hometown Station, we'll continue to ask Oscar about just his plan and his vision for Los Angeles County should he succeed Robert Luna as a new sheriff when we come back on your Hometown Station. All right, we're back here live on your Hometown Station. This is the Bishop of Santa Clarita, Pastor Jerry Cook, here with Politics and the Pulpit. We are speaking with Oscar Martinez, Lieutenant Oscar Martinez, who is running for Los Angeles County Sheriff against Robert Luna. And I wanted to ask Oscar about a case, a federal case, against Deputy Trevor Kirk. This is a sensitive issue for a lot of our law enforcement personnel, not only within my own congregation, but of course that has reverberations not only here in Los Angeles, but beyond. What is your take on the Trevor Kirk situation, and how would you handle it should you have been sheriff instead of Luna?
So just a quick background on what happened with that Deputy Trevor Kirk. He was assigned to the city of Lancaster. He responded to what we call a 211 now. That is a robbery now at one of the local supermarkets there. He gets there, he sees a woman who matches the description, a woman and a man who matches the description, and him and his partner go to detain them. Obviously, there's a lot of more details. I'm just giving you the basic. The woman, who's also the suspect of the robbery, begins to film him and begins to approach him. He tells her to back off. Then a use of force happens, and then he sprays her with OC spray. Now, usually we will handle that as just like a regular use of force. You know, it was a takedown, he sprays her, handcuffs her, we're done. The investigation happened, take about 30 days, and pretty much that's it. You never hear from it again. Mm-hmm. Now, what happened here was that the sheriff decided to have a press conference. He was being pushed by, again, those anti-police activists, especially cancel the contract up in the Antelope Valley, and he decided to have a press conference. There was no need for it. There was no one called for that press conference. And in that press conference, I believe he showed the video. I don't remember. It's been more than a year now. And then he said that he has some serious concerns with this use of force. Now, keep in mind, I want to say almost every other day our deputies out there, taking the bad guys, the suspects, out with OC spray. Simple as that.
He did everything by the book.
He did everything by the book. In fact, I believe that our training bureau, who pretty much reviews all our uses of forces, our Category 2 uses of forces, determined that the force was within policy. But for whatever reason, again, the sheriff decided to have this press conference. Now, he's claiming now that he never took the case to the federal government. Let's assume that's true. But why did you have the press conference? Why did you take our deputy, and as we say in the department, throw him under the bus? Why did you go out public saying that you had issues with that? And if that was the case, you keep that internal, and you make sure that the deputy receives whatever discipline that's fair according to the policy. But he didn't. He went in public, and he embarrassed the department, and he threw this deputy under the bus for no reason whatsoever. The federal government picks up the case, and I'm not privy to what happened in the actual trial, but he was found guilty of excessive force.
Now, do you think it's that type of action by the sheriff, Robert Luna, that causes the rest of the department to be leery about doing their job the way they were trained to do their job? Even the way they were trained is now being scrutinized. And even though this is not supposed to be a political seat, do you think Luna's playing politics by actually having that press conference?
100%. Yes, he knew what he was doing. He knew that the sheriff of this county, the elected sheriff, the highest law enforcement officer, having a press conference, calling the press, and talking about this case was going to get picked up by the media, and probably was going to alert the feds to whatever they were looking at. Now, according to him, the feds decided to look at this case because there was some kind of complaint or something along those lines. But again, I go back. Why did you have the press conference in the first place then? and say the things that you said about this deputy and this incident, when you knew that the deputy used force based on the way he was trained in our department policy.
Have you had any interaction with Robert Luna to where you've had to talk to him, express any decisions, any opinions? Have you had any interaction with Robert Luna?
Not like that. I have interactions with him. I'm part of our military club, a military group that we have in the department. But you have to understand, right now, the department is in a state of fear. Our deputies, our sergeants, our lieutenants, and I can say many executives within the department are scared of speaking up because that ability to say something to the higher authorities within our department is not there. This is a state of fear that I have never seen before.
Who do you think is funding Luna prior to him becoming sheriff, and who do you think will be his primary funders as he seeks a second term?
Well, he was a good friend of George Gascon. He called George Gascon his mentor, his dear friend. He said he went out and talked to George Gascon many times while he was in Long Beach, and I believe those conversations continue after he became sheriff. Who funded him? I don't know, but I can tell you this: he was not funded by we the people. He was funded by some group to ensure that he can carry out their policies and procedures.
And do you think it was a plan that, and this is just me, I'm just, in my mind, I'm thinking, it's funny that Luna and Gascon would almost come in right around the same time and in tandem cause such law enforcement disarray in our community.
Absolutely. This is not by accident. All of this is by design. First was George Gascon, and then they went after the sheriff's department. And they're still going to continue to go after the sheriff's department. Because as we say, if the sheriff's department in LA County goes one way, most of the other agencies are going to go the same way.
Yeah.
And my advice to the people of LA County is this. Last year, we began to correct the criminal justice system when we defeated George Gascon. I am asking you to support me so we can finish the job by defeating his friend, Robert Luna.
I want to ask you about the Board of Supervisors. I asked you earlier about the fact that the sheriff works for we the people and not necessarily the Board of Supervisors, though you still need to have a working relationship with the board. But there was talk when Sheriff Villanueva was still in charge that there were folks asking the Board of Supervisors to just fire the sheriff. Does the Board of Supervisors have the ability to just fire an elected official like the sheriff?
So sadly, they do now. They did pass a measure under Alex Villanueva's term, and that gave them the power to fire the sheriff. Now, keep in mind, there's other counties in California that have the same procedures, a little bit different. San Bernardino, San Francisco, they actually, I believe, they were the last county, that board supervisor, that exercised that authority to remove the sheriff. Here in LA County, the way it's written, it's never been tested in court. Obviously, they did it during the tumultuous experience that the board had with Alex Villanueva when he was sheriff. I don't think it will pass constitutional muster because the way it's written right now, the board can fire the sheriff. But it doesn't say anything about the assessor, the district attorney, who are also elected. And it doesn't say anything as to who can fire the board of supervisors. So again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a legal scholar, but I believe there's some constitutional questions there that need to be answered regarding that measure.
Fill our listeners in on contract cities, Oscar, and the whole notion of greasing palms and favoritism with cities. Talk to the listeners a little bit about that.
The Sheriff's Department is unique in that it has three main functions. Patrol, those are the deputies you see out there on the streets. Custody, the county jail, and courts. Those are the three basic functions of the Sheriff's Department. Everything else, secondary to that. Now, in addition with that, out of the 88 cities in LA County, about 44 cities contract with the Sheriff's Department for the basic policing needs. The cities pay for a certain amount of deputies, and they expect that service. They expect those resources to be provided to them. A good example is Lancaster. They didn't receive what they paid for. And what happened? Lancaster's suing the department right now. A lot of cities are pretty much considering doing the same thing. Just recently, right here in Santa Clarita, City Council sent a letter to the Board of Supervisors, hey, we're not getting what we're paying for here. Where are the deputies that we pay for? West Hollywood, just yesterday, the day before, had a similar conversation in their city council. So that's a concern from the contract city, and rightly so. Per the government code, they paid for a service. They should get that service. This administration is taking those resources from the contract city for some kind of pet projects or some kind of task force for the county. It's free labor for the county. And then it leaves the contract city short. It forces our deputy to work extra overtime because we have to meet the contract of the contract cities. And it makes absolutely no sense to me. The contract city should get what they pay for. If there's going to be some kind of task force, some kind of project for the county, well, we'll do that if we can pay for it, you, the county, or whoever needs it, or if we have the resources. Right now, we don't. The department is 1,400 deputies short. We're going to have to make some cuts. We're going to have to decide what are we going to do. Are we going to stick to our three basic priorities, custody, patrol, and courts, or are we going to take our deputies and work them pretty much to death, God forbid?
Yeah. Obviously, not only is the sheriff up for election in 2026, but it's a big election year
Yes.
here in the state of California. We have seen a one-party system for the last almost 20 years now, at least in the governor's mansion, and for the most part in the state assembly and in the state senate, where Democrats basically have the much higher numbers and Republicans are basically infantile.
Correct.
We have at least two Republicans who have tossed in their hat to the ring. Sheriff Chad Bianco from Riverside County, who I'm going to ask you about in just a second, and of course Steve Hilton, who is the has a book that's coming out about California and is also a host on the Fox network. Do you think that Californians have grown sick and tired, finally, of this one-party system to where now we're finally saying, you know what, maybe we should let the other guys do something now? Do you think it's finally time that California says, we've given you Democrats this many years, and it's been a lot.
Yes.
You've screwed our state up. The Golden State is tarnished. Crime is high. Homelessness is rampant. It's the most expensive, if not one of the most expensive places to live. We're penalized for driving cars. Gas prices is $4.75, where I just go across the state line in Arizona and it drops by $2. Do you think that California is finally ready to vote R?
To be fair, I think they're ready to vote for a change. It all depends how the Republicans are going to sell the message. We need to unite. Republicans, conservatives, independents need to unite if they want to see that change. Just watching the Democrats falling apart is not going to help the cause. We need to have a clear message. We need to exactly say what we're going to do to better the economy, and in my case, what we're going to do to improve public safety and to make sure that public safety remains outside of politics. Donald Trump, God bless him, he got 53% of the Hispanic Latino vote. 53% for the male Hispanic, about 46% for the female Hispanic. I'm just throwing that out there as it's to show that there's a shift. But we can't just rest on that success. We need to move forward. We need to carry the message. We need to carry the principles that make the Republican Party different from the Democratic Party. My fear is that the Republicans are going to pretty much try to imitate the Democrats to get votes, and they're going to lose the messaging. We need to say we are different, and this is why we're different, and this is how we're going to fix things. I believe that people are ready for that message.
And I sure hope that Sheriff Chad Bianco, whom right now I'm kind of behind it. I say kind of because I got Steve coming on in May, and mainly because I just think it's fair to hear the other side.
Of course.
Even though he's on our own side. But I had Chad here where you're seated a few weeks ago. We had a meet and greet for him up at our church, and he answered our questions. And he looks rugged. He looks like old California.
Yes.
Big belt buckle and mustache, and kind of looks like he stepped out from that movie Tombstone.
Yes.
So,
which is a huge movie, law enforcement.
Yeah, exactly. It's and oft quoted, right?
Yes.
The Doc Holliday
Yes.
stuff. But anyway, my question to you is though, do you think that Los Angeles County is ready to get rid of Robert Luna? And do you think there's enough support for an individual like yourself to come against Robert Luna and say, you know what, give me a shot at this. I'm going to be for the law enforcement. I'm going to be for the people of Los Angeles County. Do you think, even though it's an uphill climb,
Yes.
do you think you have what it takes to do that?
100%, yes. I believed I survived Afghanistan. I survived Iraq. I believe I can survive this race.
Absolutely. I want you to tell our listeners a little bit about where they can go online to look more information up on you, where they can support you. I know you're going to need money for this race.
100%.
Luna is going to have money
Yes.
coming from Fort Knox, and there is no doubt that they're going to do everything they can to reelect him. So tell our listeners a little bit about where they can find you online and other things as well.
You can go online, oscar4sheriff.com. That's Oscar, the number 4, sheriff.com. On my website, you're going to see links to all my social media, and you're also going to have a link to volunteer. We definitely volunteer, especially later on during the election. And you're also going to see the big, nice yellow button that says donate. Please, I'm asking you to please donate. I can make it easy for you. You know, for 2026, you can agree to give me $20.26 every month automatically, and it's going to help a lot for the campaign. LA County is a big county. It's the size of a lot of state, and it's going to take a lot of resources and a lot of funding in order to beat the left and take back public safety for we the people.
I'm not going to ask you necessarily for an exact amount, but what are you shooting for in terms of an amount?
The average campaign for sheriff is about $1.5 million, you know, all the way to the general election.
And me and Mike will just write you out a check right after this interview is
appreciate
over.
it. Thank you.
And don't cancel it until after 2026.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Pastor.
All right. Well, it's great to have you here with us today in studio. This is Oscar Martinez running for LA County Sheriff against Robert Luna. We're going to hear more from him over the coming weeks right here at KHTS. He, of course, is a resident of our community right here, and so you'll be able to see him at various events and functions here in Santa Clarita as well as in greater Los Angeles County. Oscar, thank you so much for joining us today at your hometown station.
Thank you, Pastor. I appreciate it.
All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about the infiltration of the left in evangelicalism when we return on Politics and the Pulpit. All right, we're back here for our final segment of Politics and the Pulpit here on your hometown station, AM 1220 and 98.1 FM. We just had the privilege of talking to Oscar Martinez, Lieutenant Oscar Martinez, who is running to unseat Sheriff Robert Luna. I trust me, you're going to hear more about from Oscar over the course of the next few weeks. And, of course, he will be back on our show several times, making sure we can get his name out there. And so one of the things that is going to help our community is not just, electing a new DA, which thankfully we did with Nathan Hochman, but we're going to have to course correct when it comes to the sheriff, because we need somebody that's going to stand up not only for we the people, but, of course, is going to back his law enforcement personnel out there, especially the job that they're doing, that they were trained to do. And so I think it's going to be very, very important, probably one of those local races here in California that are going to probably get national attention. So let's keep our eye on the sheriff's race here in Los Angeles County. Well, as I promised earlier, you hear me talk a lot about the progressive left and how it has infiltrated everything, including our schools. It's infiltrated our politics. It's infiltrated our common sense thinking. 5 minutes ago, we all believed we were male and female. That's how we were biologically created, if you will. But now, of course, I guess gender is on a spectrum, and there's over 95 genders, depending on who you talk to. And so the progressive left is insanity. It's why Donald Trump won. One of the main reasons why he won November of 2024. But you'd be surprised how much progressive leftism has infiltrated broader evangelical Christianity. And there are some names out there like David French, who is a Presbyterian, who used to be very conservative, but I think has displayed elements of TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, and he is now, of course, writing for lunatic fringe, bulwark, rhino publications, and he's nuts. Another guy that I used to respect, but not anymore, is a gentleman by the name of Russell Moore. Russell Moore is the editor-in-chief of Christianity Today. Just to let you know how far that publication has fallen, that was originally a magazine that Billy Graham began several years ago. Russell Moore is now the editor. And leading up to Easter Sunday, Christianity Today published an article by a guy named Daniel Silliman. You're going to notice just how Silliman he really is. This was the head of the article. Was Jesus crucified with nails? Now, I didn't know that was like something that we really had to talk about. But this article goes on to say why one evangelical Bible scholar thinks the answer might be no. And he goes on in this article, and again, you can read it on Christianity Today, and he goes on to talk about historical narratives and opinions of people and some tradition. And what's interesting is he completely forgets the main source, the Bible. And when I read the article, I thought to myself, why hasn't he cited Scripture? Why hasn't he made that his main focal point? And when he does, it's in a dismissive manner. And again, there's a Scripture verse in the book of Romans that says this in chapter 1 of Romans. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. And this Daniel Silliman is a silly man. And he is a fool. And he got such backlash. And Christianity Today got such backlash. And Russell Moore got such backlash that they actually had to contact Silliman again to write a correction, a revising. And the first article was Jesus crucified with nails? ? And the apology was nailing down the truth of Christ's crucifixion, apologizing for what I got wrong, reporting on an idiosyncratic view on how Jesus died. And let me read a little bit of this. Like so many Christians, I spent a lot of time before Easter thinking about the crucifixion, how it must have felt for Jesus to die that way, and how God chose this particular device of Roman terror to accomplish our salvation, and how it worked practically to kill someone on a cross. A little morbid, I guess, but hey, some people think morbid things. An article in Biblical Archaeology Review piqued my reporting curiosity. A Bible professor suggested it was possible that crucifixions at the time of Christ's death used ropes rather than nails. That's obviously an idiosyncratic view and almost certainly wrong, it seemed to me, but I thought it was interesting. My curiosity took me to the descriptions of Christ's death and the details in those accounts. Here comes the money shot. Quote, I didn't think about John 20:25 and the implication of the idea that Thomas, doubting Thomas, one of Jesus' 12 disciples, would be mistaken to think the resurrected Jesus would have nail marks in his hands. Thomas clearly would not have said that if the Romans at that time used ropes. And what he's talking about is when Thomas doubted the resurrected Christ and said to the disciples, listen, I'm not going to believe unless I put my finger in the print of the nails in his hands and put my hand in his side, where, of course, he was riven by the Roman soldiers to make sure that he was indeed dead. John 20 clearly says, put my finger in the nails of his hands. And also, there's a prophecy in the Old Testament, Psalms 22, which is a prophecy of Christ's crucifixion, says, they pierced my hands and my feet. Well, what did they pierce it with? They didn't pierce it with rope. They must have pierced it with nails. This is what this author goes on to say in closing. My article implicitly called into question the inerrancy of Scripture. In my eagerness to explore the historical context of Christ's death, I missed that. I'm sorry. And then if you look at the original article, was Jesus crucified with nails, which caused this secondary article, it says this, it says, correction, this article has been revised to clarify that Scripture, including the Gospel of John, indicates that Jesus was crucified with nails, and that Christianity Today, along with Christian scholars and theologians throughout church history, affirm that account. Folks, here's what happens. When leftism creeps in to anything, it kills it every time, even evangelical Christianity. And folks, you know why I believe Jesus was crucified with his hands nailed to the cross and his feet nailed to the cross? Because that's what the Scripture says. I just believe it because that's what the Scripture says. And I'm glad there's enough people out there that even read this leftist publication, Christianity Today, by Russell Moore, that they actually pushed back on him. And they finally buckled, and I'm glad they did, and offered a correction and a secondary article to correct the mistake. Folks, can I just say something? Just believe the Bible. Don't believe everything you hear about what others say about the Bible, but just believe the Bible. Next Wednesday on this show, we're going to have Jessica Tapia. She is the teacher that was fired from the Riverside School District a little over a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, for standing up for her biblical convictions about parental rights and the whole gender confusion issue. We'll have her on the show next week. Encourage you to listen in. Thanks for tuning in today on Politics in the Pulpit on your hometown station. We will catch you next week.